Welcome everyone again to Be Seen and Be Heard. Thank you for dedicating your time and your energy to be here with us this evening. Beyond gathering within the Asian community today, it would be remiss not to address the part that we are one part of a larger human community, and we stand in solidarity with the Black community and against the recent violence. With today's guilty trial verdict, we hope to see continued justice served for the Black community. Moving into today's events, I would want to kick things off with getting us all oriented on this amazing Hopin platform, and we'll be practicing quickly using the poll and chat functions together. So we'll ease right into it. On the right-hand upper side of Hopin, please go ahead and find the word stage and the word polls. So stage and polls on the upper right-hand side. And to start with a really hard-hitting question for you all tonight. If you could only live with one carb for the rest of your life, what would it be? Noodles or rice? Go ahead and cast your vote. And while you're practicing with the voting and waiting for the poll results, let's also try the chat functionality. So go ahead and type in your must order favorite rice dish or noodle dish. I can see that we are a noodle family, and that's okay because I love noodles. Awesome. So we know how to use the chat and the poll. We're ready to graduate to really hard questions. As you all know, our community is facing great tragedy right now. And yes, it is true. I am talking about the tapioca shortage. I think we're all aware, but bubble tea may be scarce for us all summer. So in the poll, are you panicked or are you staying cool, calm, and collected under pressure? Let us know how you feel about the bubble tea shortage. Again, if you're newly joining us, on the upper right-hand side in Hopin, go ahead and click Stage and Polls and find the two polls you can take part of. And also try the chat functionality. Type in your favorite bubble tea order. Let us know what we should be eating. I probably shouldn't have done this during dinner time because now I'm really hungry, but it seems like we love noodles as a group, and we also are staying cool and not too fazed by the tapioca and bubble tea shortage. Good to know. All right, I think everyone's pretty much settled in, and now you're experts in Hopin. Congratulations. So I want to formally welcome you all to Be Seen and Be Heard. Welcome to my Asian brothers and sisters. Welcome to our allies and our friends. Welcome to Mom, if you figured out Hopin. Just kidding, you definitely did not. You're each in front of a screen in your home in quarantine, so let me try to give you a sense of the virtual room that you're all in together and make it feel a little bit more tangible for everyone tonight. Tonight, we are 2,748 people strong across 50 companies. Behind these beautiful logos you see up on the slide, that is 2,748 individuals who chose to spend their evening together today with one another. And that absolutely gives me goosebumps. And I imagine that is the case for you as well. So I'd like to just take a minute to let the power of that number and of this community of shared strength and unified support wash over all of us. I invite everyone to join me in taking the biggest, deepest breath of your day, your week, maybe your month. All together, no one can see you. Roll down your shoulders and just breathe deeply. We are here today, and we are present in the moment together. This event, Be Seen and Be Heard, is the first, the only, and the biggest cross-company event to support the Asian community. 100 leaders from Asian communities across all of these amazing companies came together and in a record of 4 weeks planned this entire evening for all of us so that we could forge a stronger community together. To touch on our theme tonight, to be seen means to see each other, to be seen by our allies, to be seen by our industries and our places of work. To be heard means to find our voices together and individually on what feels sometimes so hard to put into word these days. And to be seen and to be heard means to take up all the space that this community deserves, both here tonight and in our places of work ongoing. I want to share how important your presence is today in building this community at this moment in time, and a few shared goals we have together for this event. We all know attending an event doesn't solve all of the problems, but it is a meaningful and important step towards change. You are each validating to the other people here that they are not alone, and you are each seeking to break down that silo of isolation to connect to others across this community who share your experience. And that is why your presence here tonight is so incredibly meaningful. To ground us in a few shared goals for this evening, the first goal, we are crossing the silos of our individual companies and we're amplifying our collective strength, our voice, and our power as one community. Secondly, through the breakouts and the panel, you're going to learn of resources, ideas, and actions that we can all take today and tomorrow in our workplace to make an impact. And thirdly, we're bringing together Asian communities and ERGs to allow for networking and new relationships amongst other like-minded people across companies that will last far beyond tonight. And lastly, while there's been a lot of focus recently on Asian suffering and Asian pain, we are also here to celebrate Asian leaders and Asian excellence. And that starts with all of you for showing up today, but it also means our amazing panelists who are leading the charge here. And with that, I am so thrilled to bring our moderator, Dion Lim, and welcome Dion to the stage to introduce herself.
Okay, I think everyone can hear me, right? Wow, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I loved the BTS, the carbohydrates question. All of it was such a great kickoff to this event. I think never in a million years did any of us imagine being part of an organizational event such as this. And it's really cool to see everyone chime in from where you are tuning in from physically, a lot in the Bay Area and the US, but as far away as Australia and parts of Europe as well. So thank you all so much for being here. As you just heard, and as you've probably seen in the promotional materials for this event, my name is Dion Lim. I'm a news anchor and a reporter at ABC7 KGO TV here in San Francisco. And I want to kick things off by sharing with you a little bit about how I got here. For all of you who are not in the Bay Area and don't watch my coverage day in and day out, maybe you see me on Instagram or social media. I am Dion Lim TV, and you can tell that every single day for really the past year, I've woken up with this knot in the pit of my stomach, because it's not what am I going to cover today, but more so, God, my voice is cracking thinking about it because it's so emotional for me. How many instances of hate, violence, and xenophobia against the Asian American community am I going to cover today? And there are always these catalyst moments, I think, in one's career. And one happened for me at the very beginning of the pandemic. I had gone from going on the red carpet for the Oscars to covering the Warriors, going on their NBA Finals run, to covering mass shootings and some of the largest wildfires in California history. But when the pandemic hit, something really ignited in another sense. And that was I understood my purpose as a journalist. And it was to champion the stories of Asian Americans who were hurting so badly, not only through the instances of hate that were verbal, the recollections of being coughed on in the middle of the street, but the instances and the cases that soon turned violent and ultimately resulted in death. There was one case of an older man who was collecting cans in San Francisco, trying to provide some extra dollars for his family. He was beaten and humiliated and ridiculed to the point of being in tears. And it was that moment, that story that I broke, that opened the floodgates to us realizing as a society that this is not a new phenomenon, that we need to bring this to the forefront. And that's when I made a decision myself as a journalist to champion as many of these stories as I possibly can. Before I get to our first panelist, I do want to also share that no matter where you're tuning in from, my path to the Bay Area started in very non-diverse parts of the country, including Kansas and North Carolina and Tampa Bay, Florida. I thought being in the Bay Area was going to be much more inclusive, but in a way, I've been told by law enforcement that it is our dirty little secret that this happens so often in our society. So the fact that we're discussing a very uncomfortable topic and we're getting comfortable with it should be a very big triumph to all of you. Now, to someone who I've gotten to know a little bit over the past year, someone who never imagined being an activist, and he is not, neither am I, but an activator, is Eric Toda. Please give it up, everybody, the global head of social marketing at Facebook. Eric, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Dion, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I honestly don't know what to say, to be quite honest with you. I think Dion said a lot of it. You know, I think that, as Dion mentioned, I'm not an activist. I'm in marketing, and I work at Facebook, and I know I've worked at a lot of companies that are represented here today, from Nike to Airbnb, Snapchat. And the reason why I'm here today was because 2 months ago, I made a call to action to my industry to do more. That we were celebrating Super Bowl, and in marketing, it is one of the greatest pinnacle moments of the year. When you see Super Bowl spots, that is the culmination of all your work. And every spot was hopeful. Every spot was talking about how we got past the summer and how we got past November, and now we are onto a better day. And this was 2 days after a whole straight week of violence against our community. A Filipino man that looked very close to my own grandfather was slashed across the face in New York. A man in Oakland was pushed down, and this hit me in a way that I just couldn't stand by and not want to activate at least my industry and my community to do more, not just to post on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, not just to say that you stand with us, but to actually do more. Because as these things were happening, ERGs across every single company were hurting. People like you and 1,300 of you right now watching this were hurting, and no one was listening to us. No one was reaching out to us. And it took a huge push for this moment to even happen. And so I'm very proud to be a part of this. I'm very proud to be a part of and standing alongside all of you. And again, my only hope here is to continue to push us forward with Dion, with Tammy, with all of you, so that we can, again, provide more context, but also support for every single person that is hurting right now, because I know a lot of you are. I know we're in it right now, and we're in the middle of a cultural awakening. And that stems from the Me Too movement to Black Lives Matter to Stop Asian Hate. We are in this massive cultural awakening right now that should not be silent. And so we should continue to push, because that window that kept us from speaking up, that's now shattered. That's shattered forever, and we're never going back. And so again, I'm very proud to be here with all of you, and I'm very proud to stand alongside a real activist. And that activist is someone that makes activism look very cool, and someone that I look up to, and that is Tammy Cho. And so I'll let Tammy take it from here.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be sharing the stage with everybody else here. And thank you, Dion, for leading this conversation with us as well. And my world is actually started off in the tech world as well. And I think similar to what Dion and Eric shared, I formerly would never have identified myself as an activist either. So it's very interesting to hear Eric's introduction in that sense. And I think I've more recently have come to embrace that as well as part of my identity. And in terms of how I got here, last year when we were starting to see the spike in hate crimes and seeing that these hate crimes were affecting small businesses, some businesses were experiencing up to an 80% drop due to fears and misinformation surrounding coronavirus, and seeing just how many of our most vulnerable in our community were being impacted, including the elderly, as well as really, really young kids being bullied in school for it. It definitely struck a chord with me. Growing up in Orange County, California, and having immigrant parents who ran small businesses, I've seen them time and time again being othered. Despite the fact that, my dad is a U.S. Army veteran, for instance, just so many different types of incidents. And all of those experiences experiences really came rushing to the forefront as I was seeing these stories, and felt compelled to do something about it. And that's when I happened to land on a social media post that my now co-founder, Michelle Hanabusa, had shared on Instagram, also sharing so vulnerably how she was feeling about the incidents that we were seeing and wanting to do something about it. So then I ended up jumping on a call with her, and we just unpacked a little bit about what were some of the first steps that we could really take together. And it seemed like the first step that we can really take was just addressing the lack of awareness around these issues. And so from there, we ended up joining forces with a few other folks, including Kiri Okubo, who coined the hashtag Hate is a Virus, and just launched with an awareness campaign. And it started with just a few members of our community, right? Just sharing our stories in terms of how we were feeling and how this has been impacting us. And Dion was one of the first folks who also jumped on board to help us really amplify that campaign. And soon, within weeks, we had reached millions through our campaign. And that essentially became the basis for how we got even more involved with this work. We heard from the community wondering, why are these incidents happening and what can we actually do to address them? And so from there, we decided to launch Hate is a Virus as an official organization that's really focused on finding ways to raise awareness, educate our community, and hold spaces to have dialogues around these issues and find ways to amplify other local organizations that are actively doing this work.
Tammy, you've come such a long way. I remember when the campaign really just kicked off and everyone was just kind of navigating how this was going to shape up, and look at how everything snowballed. And I think that's a good way for everyone to think of it, is that these conversations are just growing in steam and size, and look just by the participation today. Now, something that Eric talked about organizationally within different companies, that brings me to our next panelist. I want to talk to Alan Shim for how he got here as well. He is the CFO of Slack. Please welcome him to the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm getting used to the hop-in platform here. Great to be here with all of you. I think my day job is definitely to be the CFO of Slack, but I'm more here to stand in solidarity with fellow Asian Americans. I'm a Korean American by background. My parents are also immigrants. It's a big part of my identity and my my journey. And I think overall, what brought me to this particular stage is, I would say, even over the last few months, seeing the rise in violence against the elderly in particular triggered something for me that really didn't happen before, something that goes deeper, something more emotional, something more even psychological. Because when I see the elderly, I see my parents, I see my grandparents, I see symbols of sacrifice for the lifestyle that I'm able to have, and the opportunity I was able to experience here. And I think for me, seeing the violence, the physical abuse triggered this, this violation of the respect and the honor I impart to that population and to that generation. And so that, to me, was a bit of the tipping point to say, like, well, what more can I do? To ask that question, to try to participate in something like this as, in my role to increase and amplify, the voices that we have here, and just to acknowledge, I think, as has been said, like, being here together, I think, shows collective strength. But I think also it's okay to acknowledge that being here together allows us to also heal better, because we can share the collective pain that we feel in this. And so that is something that I hope we can all acknowledge and embrace together. And I'm really thankful for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to learning a lot myself personally. And throughout this day, I hope that individually and collectively, we can all kind of grow and make progress. And again, in something that I think will take time to, won't be solved overnight. But I think, together we can definitely make things better, day by day.
Dion's refreshing right now, so she'll be right back. Right back.
Stay tuned.
Okay, can everyone see me?
There you are.
Ah, wonderful.
Back.
Live TV. There's no choice. We just keep rolling. The show goes on no matter what. Thanks, you guys. All right, well, let's get to our first question, because I want to talk a little bit about this whole phenomenon where people like to say, and I've seen this in my reporting, the response be, well, this is totally new. I never realized this was a problem in America. I will never forget when I was in a newsroom in Florida when we were talking about Trayvon Martin in an editorial meeting, and I had my colleagues, I was the only person of color in the room. Everyone around me said, oh, I didn't realize racism was an issue that we should cover. I don't know if we should dedicate time in the newscast for that. So taking that instance and seeing how it's exploded into today's discussions, let's start with Tammy, because every time I hear this from my audience that racism is a new phenomenon, I just want to tell them, no, actually, it's very deep rooted. Can you give us a summary on the history of the hate, how it kind of manifested itself to where we are today?
Dion, I'm glad you're asking that, and I'm giving a very, very much abbreviated version because there's so much to cover. And clearly, I think what you're hearing is just symptomatic of just the lack of narrative and coverage around these issues that have been very insidiously ingrained in our communities. When we think about especially what has happened with the API community recently as well, these are not isolated incidents or random events. It definitely follows a pattern of systemic racism. For centuries, our community has been scapegoated for issues that have been perpetrated by issues like sexism, xenophobia, capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, and more. And some instances even in history that we can allude to is, from the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, to surveillance targeting Muslims and South Asians following 9/11. There's just been and seeing the events that we've been seeing due to COVID, the scapegoating of Asians post-COVID-19, it just goes to show that there has been a very deep history of these issues that are ingrained into our different systems. Even on top of that, something important to note is the intersectional lens as well, right? Where when it comes to moments of history, even for Asian women, they're particularly vulnerable to racialized misogyny. One report showed that nearly half of the incidents that have affected incidents of hate that have affected folks are targeted towards women as well. And so I think it's important to recognize just how deep, if we look into our history, to see how deep this racism is.
And maybe, Eric, you can answer this. Oh, I hear a little bit of an echo. Oh, there we go. Did you ever learn about this in school? Because time and time again, I hear from people who are Asian American or not saying this was never part of my history curriculum.
Here's the thing. Asian American history in our journey in the United States is an erasing history. It's a revisionist history. And I think it's very sad to me that that we continue to be okay with this, to be quite honest with you. And I think, the question that you got asked, Dion, is racism against the Asian American community really real? Mm-hmm. Like, that's triggering to me. Like, I feel triggered by that. And the reason why I feel triggered by that is because, again, the lack of empathy and real, I want to say, perception is because people don't learn about this. I didn't learn about the Japanese internment camps that my own grandparents were in 79 years ago in school. I learned it from them. And we went to museums and saw them, saw displays for internment camps. And I asked the question, why don't we learn this? And the answers were vague. If you grew up, and to be honest with you, if you grow up in Seattle, if you grow up in Oregon, you're taught that, yeah, there were Japanese internment camps, but they were actually really pleasant. They were great places. And it was voluntary for people to actually go to those. And so therefore, it's actually not just an erasing history, it's a revisionist history. And so, yeah, I wasn't taught this in school. I wasn't taught about the Chinese Exclusion Act. I wasn't taught about Vincent Chin, which is probably one of the most landmark anti-Asian hate crimes that wasn't even labeled a hate crime in our history. And my fear here is that if we do not rectify this, and if we don't look at K through 12 curriculum and not just include Black history, not just include Latinx history, but also include Asian American history, we are destined for our kids to not learn about what happened today with the George Floyd case. we are destined to not learn about what's happening on the borders of Texas and Arizona and California with kids being thrown in cages. And we'll think that all these things are totally new. We've been thrown in cages before. There has been a travel ban before. It's called the China's Exclusion Act. And so therefore, we need to grapple and embrace the uncomfortable and ugly sides of American history, because that is our history. And as much as we grapple and embrace slavery, we need to grapple and embrace what has happened to other minority communities, not just for perception, but for empathy. And the more that we have that perspective, the more empathy can transcend into other generations, which then affects the hate that you see today.
Eric, I think you hit the nail on the head, because I personally am a big proponent of that education on a federal level. And I think it's going to take an awful lot of effort to get everyone on board to be behind this. That being said, that education component, as it applies to a workplace, because racism, as we know, exists not only in the real world, but in our interiors, in our offices, and our day-to-day lives, in the forms of, let's say, not just overt racism, but microaggressions. I remember, I will not say where this was, I was told by another member of my team that the only reason why I worked so hard was because I was Asian. And at the time, maybe Alan, you can answer this, what I'm leading up to. At the time, I thought, oh, it's that model minority that everyone thinks I'm smart and that I work hard. I'm going to use this to my advantage. But actually, it is exceptionally detrimental. Alan, from a workplace standpoint, what are companies' roles in combating racism?
Well, I don't have one answer for that question for sure. I think what I've seen and experienced is, I think what we're also saying here is there is no dialogue right now on these things. And I hope we also look at these situations as a moment of reflection inward as well, because I was raised in the hammer that sticks out is the one that gets, the nail that sticks out is the one that gets hammered down type of conformity and compliance. And clearly that doesn't facilitate a real dialogue there. I think for those, when you think about the workplace, these microaggressions, I think it's okay to talk about it, to speak up, to even just share it with friends. I think there's a pride that we can take individually in our resilience, in the fact that we come often from immigrant backgrounds with our parents, where like that is meant to be endured. It's meant to be something that's almost a badge of honor to take those things in. Whereas in the workplace, it can be, as you were calling out, Dion, quite detrimental, because we're not necessarily always experiencing racism that's meant to be pushing us down, but it's clearly not, it's also preventing us from going up. And that feels in some way can be viewed as less harmful because it is not as visible. But clearly, when you think about bamboo ceiling, all these different kind of ideas that are out there around the advancement and the disproportionate representation in Asians in the workforce versus Asians in leadership, there are real discussion, real dialogues that need to be had there. And maybe a very tactical thing I've seen very helpful for companies is to start opening the conversation around unconscious bias. A lot of the things I think, Dion, you were talking about are people don't see it. That's the point. And it's because there is this unconscious element that we need to really expose and create more dialogue about, because then we can start to help and bridge and create more understanding.
Yeah, I look at that, and thank you for that, Alan. I look at racism in the workplace as such a byproduct of the systemic racism in our country today, if not the greatest, most prominent example that we have yet to really grapple with. And the reason why I say that is because many times, and many of you who are in corporate America today have likely faced this. You've likely seen in a calibration or a review, someone said to you, oh, you probably don't want to be a manager. Like, that's not your thing. Like, you're good. You're good just doing your thing and keeping your head down. Or rather, some of you may have been told by a white colleague, you know what? I don't actually see you as an Asian person. So we're good. Like, I see you as another white person, and that's okay, right? I've been told both of those things. I've also been told many times that I'm just not management material because they assume that I'm going to stay quiet. They assume that I'm not going to speak up or challenge. They assume that I'm just going to keep my head down and work hard. I can tell you right now, when I came into the workforce, my father, who represents another generation, a great generation. He told me, you know what, Eric, the key to success and survival in corporate America, especially a white corporate America, is to never look a white superior in their eyes. And that right there signaled to me that this is a different time. This is a different generation. And I never subscribed to that. But probably many of you have likely heard some flavor of that, of like, don't speak up, don't be the nail that gets hammered, don't be the squeaky wheel. And I could tell you right now, Bloomberg came out with an article about a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, saying that the need for an Asian American leader is so desperate right now. And I could tell you right now, just by 1,400 of you, we exist, and we always have exist, and we're never going back. And that's why this is so important for us to share these stories, is because there are these systemic levels that are suppressing us, that are creating this bamboo ceiling, which is a term I hate, that are hindering us from rising past them. And I can tell you right now that we need to challenge. We need to speak up. We need to show the injustices that are shown to us in the workplace that are happening literally every single day, and show that this is wrong. Because again, we are part of, again, like I said before, we're part of this greater cultural awakening where women have found equality in the workplace, at least a little bit more, where Black people are now represented just a little bit more. This is a window for us that will never close, that we need to continue to speak up, and we need to continue to challenge, and we need to continue to fight for what we believe is the right thing, not what was believed to be the right thing, but what we think is the right thing for this generation.
Oh man, I kind of want to beat my chest and cheer for you right there, Eric.
I wanted to ask one more thing real quick. I mean, I was hearing that, and I think there are a lot of situations here that we're describing, and it is really hard to lump it into one category, because when I talk to younger Asian Americans who are looking to, again, I also agree with you, I don't like that term. I heard it for the first time after I became the CFO, and they said, thanks for crushing the bamboo ceiling. I said, what are you talking about? But when I talk to younger Asian Americans in their career, the thing that stands out is that there are things that we inherently need to, at least personally speaking, wrestle with in our upbringing, our cultural norms and identity around how we perceive achievement and equate that to leadership. Now, I agree with you, Eric. There's the things, examples when you said those examples, that made me mad, to hear that people were being boxed into different things. But what I found in the journey, where maybe there aren't as many people really trying to box you in, but there is a lot of value in the self-discovery and the challenging of some of the norms that we've been raised with for decades, and how to unlearn some of those things. And like I said, become an emergent generation that sees leadership, that seizes this moment, that takes on our own identity, and kind of builds upon the foundation that's been set for us.
I think it's so deeply ingrained sometimes. I even remember in the beginning when I was starting to cover some of these incidents of violence, my own mother said to me in an email, I mean, God bless her, she's so supportive and wonderful, but she said to me, why are you doing this? You should probably stop, because it's bringing negative light onto Asian Americans and making us look bad. But then once this started gaining momentum and people were listening, I think it was for the first time in my entire life, she had said she was very proud of me and what I was doing. So if I could also share a story too of Eric, you had said that, people are surprised, we are told to keep our heads down, our nose clean, and to just stay in line. Whenever I go out and I need to do a report and I'm sticking a microphone in someone's face, where I'm going toe to toe with the district attorney of San Francisco, I've never gotten so many comments of people saying, oh my God, you can do that? Or I didn't realize you had that kind of mouth. Yes, I do, and I'm going to use it. So, with that being said,
no one doesn't like you, Dion. No one doesn't like you. That's for sure.
I mean, Tammy, I want to talk about these tangible techniques, because sometimes we're in a workplace and we're scared to use our voice and use it the right way so that people will actually listen and then take action. It can be uncomfortable. And I remember when I was in that newsroom and everyone was saying that racism wasn't a problem, I kind of combatively said, actually, it is a problem, and it's been a problem for a very long time. But that did not get us to cover the story. So it's about making sure the message gets out the right way. What are some techniques that you would share with our audience?
Yeah, I love that question. And, one thing I want to add real quick too is just, I think it is so important for us to continue sharing these experiences as well, because I think because we've experienced them for so long, sometimes we don't even realize that we're experiencing these issues at work. Because we will almost internalize them and it's become our new norm. And so the more that we share these stories, the more we can recognize that something is off. And some of the strategies that we have mentioned in the past is, Dion, kind of exactly what you just shared here, where if you do hear a comment from somebody that does seem to be some level of microaggression, being able to ask even something like, what did you mean by that? And giving them a second to try to process what they had said and see if there's anything to discuss there. There's also the options of maybe after a meeting, reaching out to them afterwards to share that, I imagine that you didn't mean much harm by this comment, but this is how it has impact. This is the impact of what you had shared, and take it as that educational opportunity if you see fit. I think something I do want to know here as well is I think it is even more incredibly important. This is where the power of allies really shines, right? Where it shouldn't just be the responsibility of us to speak up and stand up for ourselves in those moments, but also for this to be a norm in the culture for other folks. If they do witness an API colleague who is hearing this comment, being able to speak up on behalf as well and advocating for their colleagues.
And also, what about you, Alan? Do you have any techniques on an office level where people can show that solidarity and that allyship?
Yeah, I think there is there's a very practical thing companies can do, which is the unconscious bias training that I was referring to earlier. I think there's just, by the name, there's a lot to be learned because it's an area of like, you don't know what you don't know. And I think I see so much for personally, in my own experience as well, benefit from that. But I think the point about allies is really good. Even for myself, I did not take a louder voice within our own company's Slack channels on what was happening over the last few months until another Asian American employee said to me, "This is really hurting me. And I see you as a leader here, and it would really mean a lot if you could use your voice to amplify this." And when I looked at that, again, in my situation, I was like, okay, well, listen, that is something I can definitely do for you. I don't have some of the other tools or answers and solutions, but this I can do. And I think for others that may not identify as, if you don't have an Asian American leader, but there is someone that you can talk to and you can trust, I think for those leaders, listen. And even if you don't necessarily have that opinion formed, you can say, listen, I talked with Tammy and I want to share something she shared with me because I thought it was really impactful. And that elevates the voices and maybe the perspectives that are more articulate, clearer, and it's also authentic, right? In terms of what your role is and the fact that you're on a journey of learning too. So I see that, and I just can't encourage enough. And I think, just echo Tammy, talk about it. You're not stronger for holding more in. And that is really, you might not even realize that. Like, that's an unconscious thing that we're probably all doing. I've done that for my whole life. And the more that you can put it out there, it really removes the power and the stigma away from it.
Yeah, my family told me growing up, I was crying over something really trivial. And my mother said, don't cry. Chinese girls only cry at their mother and father's funeral because it shows weakness. And I think that actually kind of screwed me up because for the longest time, right, we don't want to share and we don't want to be vulnerable. And I think now we have to be, especially. I do want to share, Julie Ip wrote in to say, my boss once said to me at a team meeting, this is her boss, don't be so submissive. I wasn't being submissive, pure stereotype.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, again, these things exist, right? And they happen. And I think, Julie, thank you for speaking out. Thank you for sharing. I think, again, these stories are helpful for us to just understand the level and magnitude in which these words mean. I would imagine, and I hope your manager meant well by wanting you to speak up, wanting you to rise to an occasion, et cetera. But again, there is a lack of understanding of cultural nuance when it comes to addressing, what you believe to be true about the Asian community, because we're not a monolith. And I do think that there are segments of the Asian community that act differently, right? And rightfully so, from East Asian to South Asian to Southeast Asian. And it comes down to this. It comes down to D&I training. D&I training was such a hot topic last summer. And the uncomfortable truth right now is that many D&I programs right now are very binary. They're about black and white relationships. They're not yet created to handle the nuances and cultural nuances between the Asian community and the white community and the black community, the Latinx community. And so therefore, the trainings that we're given right now are relatively outdated, and rightfully so. They should always be iterated. I was just on another ERG call talking about the role of the D&I officer is the role of managing wet clay. It's never fully formed. New information is always coming in, and it's your job to always iterate on your processes, iterate on your trainings, iterate on new information coming in and free flowing. And so I think what you're experiencing is certainly a lack of training, a lack of understanding, but also just a likely misunderstanding that he probably meant well, or they probably meant well. And I can tell you right now, you need to speak up in that moment by saying, I don't think you meant this, and this is what I actually meant. And to Tammy's original point, it's like bringing everybody along on their journey. There's a quote from the Obama summit that was, is there still room amongst the woke for the still waking? And what that means is, how do you bring bring more people on the journey to be woken up? Because again, I don't expect everybody to be an Asian American history major overnight, but I do expect people to want to listen. I do expect people to want to understand and get better, because many of us do. We just want to be better. And so again, speak up. Thank you for sharing that story. And again, I'm sorry that you had to experience that.
Before I move on to the next question, Rai Park, I think that's how you pronounce your name, says, I have an ethnic name, and I've been told on many occasions through my life that I need to participate more so that others can learn how to pronounce my name correctly. As a show of solidarity, I'm going to share with you a young woman named Phuc Bui Dien Nguyen. She's Vietnamese, was told by her professor at Laney College this past year that her name sounded too much like an expletive. And I was the only news station that championed the telling of her story, and that resulted in that professor ending up resigning from his post. So don't let anyone tell you that they need to practice your name, or at least, if you need to educate others on their name, on your name, but do it so in a way that, isn't presented such as that. I know we only have about 10 minutes, but what I want to pose to everyone is the fact that the entire world is watching and listening right now. We are approaching AAPI Heritage Month. This is fantastic, but what can we do on a day-to-day level to make sure the conversation does not fade away? Because I always like to say that this Heritage Month should be the entire year. I mean, the momentum has got to keep going. Tammy, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, I think something I do want to confront, and that we've often heard from our community as well, is that there is a sense almost of a fear that this is just a moment. And once we lose mainstream coverage of these issues, all this work will fade and everyone will move on with their lives. But the reality is that as much as racism is not new, activism is not new either. And, part of the reason we are able to be on this stage and talking about these issues today is because of the decades of work that other organizers, activist organizations have done over the years. And so I do want to encourage folks that we still have an opportunity to, and the real activism starts in our day-to-day actions. And, some of what I also want to encourage for folks is that I think oftentimes the term activism can be also very intimidating. But the reality is that, activism looks very different for every person. For some folks, it might be finding ways to champion these issues and to host conversations like we're having today. That is definitely a form of activism, pushing for social and political change. There's other forms of activism that we've seen that's with the arts. And so finding ways to use your creative skill sets to produce beautiful pieces of artwork for the community as a way to heal. And so really want to encourage folks to find different ways and steps that they can take with their own skill sets and their own experiences to help push this movement forward. And other really quick short-term action steps folks can take as well is just the power of your voice too, right? Every time we share a story, even with our closest group of friends and community members, that also is incredibly impactful. Hate is a Virus started as, we first started off as a social media post. And then from there, people tagged on and spread the word. And here we are today, right? And so really want to encourage folks to get involved and find ways to speak up, share their stories, seek out different organizations to volunteer with and support, even beyond, even when these issues are not discussed in mainstream media.
I love that. And Alan, maybe you can piggyback off what Tammy said, because sometimes I think activism, that term, is intimidating because you see in social media or you see in the news these activists who start movements and then have parades and rallies and marches, and not everybody feels comfortable with doing that. There are many other ways.
This is not going to be groundbreaking, but I think when I was thinking about even my own journey, I was realizing how few people like me post about these kinds of things, right? And I got a lot of likes and a lot of follows and all the, the people who are, but there is something to be said for those in visible positions and leadership positions. Your voice matters more, and people actually, on some level, maybe culturally conditioned to wait for you to do that so that they can, that means that's going to help unlock so much for folks, because they can say, listen, I identify with that. It doesn't feel like me to say it, maybe in those words, but for those that do, please feel empowered to do so. And when your friends do it, support them. I think that's the part that I find so surprising is those friends that those people who do stick their neck out, it's crickets sometimes from the people that you would think would support them the most. And so I think there's some of that. On the work side specifically, I'm very focused on what can we do to help, people advance their careers, grow and develop, and not disregard the race element by any means, but to grow in spite of that, to grow and to embrace that. What does it mean to confront that? And on a from what can you do tomorrow? Get feedback. If you think you should be growing in your career, get feedback and stop spending 99% of your time figuring out why they're wrong and start spending 100% of your time on why they're right. And not because it's meant to be a validation of misconceptions or anything like that. There is a reason why people are evaluating you a certain way in their reviews, and it will help you to embrace that, not as a denial of your achievement or your capability, but as a way for you to get over that hump and start to see it in terms of, okay, well, listen, there's a next chapter, there's a next level, a level up that I'm not really seeing here, that others are maybe forcing upon me on some level. But that is what the leadership journey is. And I think when I, there's a track after this, I'm very excited to have that discussion, because I think there's a lot of narrative we tell ourselves in our head that we need to get out and we need to kind of process and work through. And that's going to help unlock a lot more, I think, opportunity for folks, on an individual level.
I know we only have a few minutes left. Eric, I know one way that you are doing your part. You DM'd me about coffee and sales and how proceeds of certain coffee will go toward the cause.
I will literally do everything I possibly can. Any partnership, any product that I could slap a Stop Asian Hate sticker on to raise money for good causes, right? Whether that's Hate is a Virus, whether that's the AAJC, I'll do it. I think, again, we're all in the business world. We're all, we all have these great jobs that are actually way more influential than you think. And therefore, my only ask to you is, seek to donate your time and skills, specifically your skills, to a lot of nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits need your help, whether you're a marketer, or a comms person, or a media planner, or even a CFO. Donate your time, to these causes, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, because they will be eternally grateful. I can tell you that right now. And so there's a ton of actions that you can take. I think if you go to Tammy's website, hatesavirus.com, there's a lot of resources there that can help you get caught up to speed. But again, I think the biggest thing that I want to, that I really want us to take action on is speaking up. Speaking up. And to Alan's point, you don't really know if something's going to be reacted well. You don't really know if you're doing the right thing. I could tell you right now, when I wrote that Adweek article in early February. And so that was a moment where, Dion, you were obviously covering, but a lot of people weren't. I thought that article would get 200 views. It turned out it was one of Adweek's highest rated views of the past 2 years. And so our voices definitely matter. Our voices are definitely impactful, and your stories certainly help wake more people up than you actually expect. So continue to share and continue to speak up.
And any parting words from you, Tammy?
Yeah, I also just want to stress again, power and change comes from the people. I think oftentimes it definitely is required, but we oftentimes think that we need that one single leader to drive change and kind of lead us in this movement. But the reality is that this movement is only here because of the collection of our voices, and there's such strength in numbers. So if each of us just engage in even one small step a day to try to push this movement forward, whatever that may look like, we will see the change. We will see the change happen. Maybe not even within our lifetimes. I think that's something that we do have to confront. But just thinking about how grateful we are to be in the positions that we are today, right? Even though we are seeing a lot of these incidents, and it's heartbreaking, we are still being able to be. We've made so much strides in our community, and that is something I also want to encourage us to celebrate as we head into May, and as we continue to celebrate our community long beyond that.
Yeah, I know sometimes it feels like we're going 2 steps forward, like with an Adweek, right, piece. But then it's like the next day, we see another set of Asian grandmas beaten in the middle of the street. So it can be really discouraging. So I think the idea of just slow and steady, that this is not just going to end suddenly, something we need to remember.
Just keep pushing forward, right? I think, again, we're a part of this greater awakening. And again, it's hard to get discouraged when you do see things like the news that are about our people getting beat up. But I will tell you something, and it's not groundbreaking, but even on the darkest of days, as I've been doing this, I've never been prouder to be Asian American. I've never, ever been proud to be Asian American, and so should you. And we should continue that pride through May, because this is not a moment. This is certainly a movement, and this movement will go way past us. It'll endure us. And again, this window that we have will never be closed. We just have to keep it going. So continue to be proud, because I'm damn proud to be Asian American.
Oh my God, especially as a kid who at one point even wished that she was white, because that way people would stop bullying her. I know there are people in this audience who may have felt the same thing, because I've heard that time and time again. I feel ashamed that I even thought that. So yeah, be loud, be proud, and just continue to represent and use your voice. Alan, any parting words from you before we leave?
I think it's been well said already. I think when I look at the allies and folks who are new to this conversation, just remember and take a step back in terms of the way you might look at a situation, and the way that you might react to an Asian person, how they might act in a situation, them speaking up, would you act the same way if a white male did that same thing? And I think there's just a lot of lessons to be learned there, and just starting that and getting that, cranking that wheel on what really is, the journey there for all of us to learn collectively. I think is the opportunity here to go through it together, because we'll need allies just as much.
Yeah, so well said. And how many of you guys wish that we could save the chat? Because I'm reading through all the comments and they are so good and coming in from all over. I wish there was a way we could just compile them all and read them all later. So thank you all guys for this really wonderful discussion. I think we could have probably gone on another hour.
Sure. Thanks for doing it, everybody. And thanks for joining.
Yay. Thanks, everybody. Let's kick it over to Po-an.
Hi, everyone. Wow, I have chills. Just quick intro. My name is Po-an. My pronouns are she, her. I work full-time at Twitter, Global Chair of Twitter Asians, and one of the organizers for this event. And really, thank you so much, Dion, and each of our amazing speakers, Tammy, Alan, Eric. I'd love for all the attendees to just go in the chat and say thank you. And any other comments you have for this amazing slate of speakers. We all learned so much. Yeah, it's blowing up in there. I'm reading it. And to Dion's point, we are trying to capture a summary, some of the poignant comments or insights. We can anonymize things, but we will try and do a share out. No, wow, this is just so much love and appreciation, gratitude for all of you. Well, we know it's been a very heavy time for everyone. The news cycle never stops. So really, thank you all so much for sharing your most precious resource, your time, and being with this group to give your perspective, detail your experience, and impart the advice and action. Today, we honed in on the lived experiences of the Asian community. However, the stand against xenophobia and racism extends beyond our communities. As mentioned earlier, we stand in solidarity with the Black community. We stand with everyone who's facing hate and discrimination just on how they look. And we know that the work doesn't end here. It doesn't end today with just a guilty verdict. So we must continue to take action by listening, learning, asking, and speaking up. And the good news is we don't have to do it alone. I think we have a quick slide. We're going to pop up to acknowledge all the organizations that helped make this event happen. There's going to be a lot of logos there, familiar companies, and just a lot of leaders and volunteers who worked to make this event happen behind the scenes. Yes, I think my partner is going to, oh, awesome. I think it's appearing now. So yes, probably a lot of you saw this image, but really this is very powerful. Just to, again, show all these big brands and companies that stepped up for this. We are over 50 companies and 100 ERG leads strong. We know that coalition building is powerful, but it also takes time. So we've accomplished a lot here today by gathering so many in one place. I think at the height, it was like almost 1,500, but we also know we need to keep momentum. A quick personal story: during this past year in the pandemic, I've taken on a volunteer role with the Asian Leaders Alliance as one of their leads. And you might be wondering, what is the Asian Leaders Alliance? ALA for short. It's a community of ERG leads from over 140 organizations. There's also individuals, many diversity and inclusion specialists, people from nonprofits. So really, it's a community that's open to everyone. If we can go to the next slide, we invite each of you to stay connected with all of us, the organizers, the volunteers, and attendees, by joining ALA. So there's a few links there. There's a Slack channel, which is free and very robust. We have our website, AsianLeadersAlliance.com. There's Twitter at AsianLeadersALL, and Instagram. So please follow us, join, share your comments. We've definitely been increasing the Slack messaging, so shout out to the Slack team for helping us to increase our limit. We really want to grow. As Tammy said, Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month is next month, so we want to keep engaged, keep working together. So choose any of those mediums that suit you. We really look forward to staying connected. I will now pass on to another incredible co-lead for this event, Franklin. He's going to wrap us out before breakouts. But just before that, really quick shout out, because there were so many, again, volunteers who helped make this happen. But in particular, some of these leads, they've spent countless hours each week. So quick shout out: Franklin, Julie at Twilio, Samuel at Uber, Jimmy at SFDC, Zero at Robinhood, Carrie with Workday, Wendy with Pinterest, Jean Marie at Alpha Sites, Mabel at Airbnb, Brian at EA, Terry at Slalom, Alaric at Confluent, Mona Lisa from PayPal, Lynn and Confluent, and of course, Linda at Gong for spearheading this and for affectionately being our Asian mom. Thank you so much to all of you. And now off to Franklin.
Thank you, Pawan. I mean, Pawan mentioned a number of different things that we can do at a high level to be very active, to keep the momentum going. The one thing I wanted to highlight as we close is how we can make an impact through donating. So many of our communities are doing amazing work, but in order to help push that work forward, we need help in terms of funds. And that's even more important for us, where we often see sources of funding overlook our community. AAPIs are invisible and even marginalized, even in philanthropy. So our community is significantly lower in priority when it comes to grant making. We've barely seen any increase in funding in the past 25 years. And Asian Americans also tend to give to charities less than other communities. And so just imagine how much more the people in the organizations doing such important work, the people building our communities could do with that kind of funding. And so for our event, the one action we wanted to take was help raise about $15,000. And we were going to split that across 4 amazing charities doing important work. The first is the Asian Law Caucus, which is the nation's first legal and civil rights organization serving low-income Asian Pacific American communities. They focus on housing rights, immigration, immigrant rights, employment issues, a number of different issues impacting our community. There's also the AAJC, which is advancing civil and human rights for Asian Americans, and they definitely tried to build a fair and equitable society for all. Tammy's organization, Hate is a Virus, also set up a community action fund. They're trying to raise $1 million for the community, and they're going to review applications soon to figure out which organizations from local and national nonprofits can receive those grants. And lastly is the Community Youth Center of San Francisco, which has provided the youth of SF with a sense of belonging and vital tools and experiences to succeed in life. They actually serve over 8,000 youth each year. And so it's one of the few agencies in San Francisco really addressing the needs of diverse populations of low income and high need people in our community. And so please support these organizations. Please donate via the link that you see on the slide here. We're so close to our goal. I think we're a little bit over 10,000, almost 11,000. So just need a little bit more contributions to get us over that line. And then last of all, thanks to each and every one of you for participating, for joining for us. We've learned so much. I saw so much in the chat. You can learn more through our next portion of the event, which is networking and the breakouts. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam, who'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of what to do next.
All right. Thank you, Franklin. And thank you to all of the speakers again, to Dion for moderating, to all of the other event leads for making this happen, and to all of you guys for showing up and supporting us.